Okay. We good?
We are good, yes.
All right. I would like to start the Planning Commission meeting of February 14th, 2023. Happy Valentine's Day. First up is call to order to see who's present.
Okay, Commissioner Marino is absent and he did relay. He would be missing the meeting. Commissioner Berg?
Here.
And Chair Miller?
Here.
And Commissioner Aguirre? Absent. She also relayed she would not be here. Okay, Commissioner Davis?
Here.
Vice Chair Stevens?
Here.
And Commissioner Terry?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from last month. Has everybody read those? Is there any changes? January 10th.
I move that we accept the minutes as written.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, minutes carry. All right, then on the agenda we have the workshop, revision of the Front Street blueprint. Do we have a staff report before we do citizens input?
We are just going to go over, have a discussion about the Front Street blueprint and whether any changes are needed to the code to help facilitate what was put forth in that plan. And so my thoughts on that were that we would revisit that plan, the blueprint, just to get everybody up to speed as to what was in it. And so, let's see if I can. So I have some background here to just remind everybody the Front Street blueprint, it covered an area of our waterfront along Front Street, properties east of Bay Shore, from Ivy Avenue to the north and Market Avenue to the south. So you see the red area identifies what this plan covers. It has a purpose, the main objective to create a cohesive multimodal transportation loop through that area and to enhance economic development potential and safety in the same. The objectives revolve around access to the waterfront, ensuring we can have public access to the waterfront, connectivity and circulation in the area, so for vehicles, pedestrians, bicyclists, creating a safe, balanced, multimodal transportation system, making sure there's a variety of transportation choices available, and then making sure that we can reflect the historic and cultural significance through public art and streetscape improvements. The plan had some design objectives, and those are on the screen. They relate to bicycle and pedestrian safety. So they want to improve the existing network, making access and intersection improvements. This is where they consider the need to reduce the number of driveways along Front Street to ensure that we have kind of the cohesive, connective streets, sidewalks, and this limits pedestrian vehicle conflicts when you do that. An objective for wayfinding and public art, and pedestrian pathways and overlooks, wanting to use the public right-of-ways along Front Street on the east, adjacent to the waterfront, to provide overlooks and access to the waterfront. Again, objective is to have improvements for circulation and connectivity in that area. Parking management, talking about managing parking in the area by maybe the city providing more parking lots or shared parking lot opportunities. And then being involved in future projects of interest, making sure we're collaborating with community partners to facilitate some of these projects that came out of the Front Street Blueprint. This screen just highlights how that blueprint interacts with our current development code. So the Front Street Blueprint Plan area is almost one and the same as our Waterfront Heritage Zone District. And so you'll see that district colored in the kind of teal green. It is, the zone district extends beyond the plan area by 1 block, where you see south of Market, between Market and Commercial, that is also Waterfront Heritage District zoning, but the plan area didn't kind of accommodate that block, just for reference. So what came out of this plan was the consultants looked at our Waterfront Heritage Zone District standards and said, there are some areas that we think support implementation of the plan, and that is with respect to provisions regulating signs and architectural design. And then they said, we think there are some provisions that might not provide enough flexibility to implement these projects they want to see down there. And so I'll go through those one by one. They called out a prohibition of transportation services accepting rail and marine in this zone, and that might not offer enough flexibility for the type of projects or developments in this area. And so I see.
Just a second, you say rail and marine?
Except for rail and marine.
Oh, okay, they are now, they're accepted, okay.
Yeah.
Because there is a railroad track there, after all, yeah.
Absolutely, I know, right?
Yeah.
So I guess one of my questions to Planning Commission is, what is a transportation service? What are we talking about when we're prohibiting those? Yes.
And that was one of my questions, and also jumping ahead a little bit, if we ever defined or talked about what is water oriented.
Yes,
I was very confused on that as well.
Absolutely, good. I'm glad you caught that, because me too. I want to be able to define both of those terms. So that's up for kind of discussion. But you'll see too, one thing I want to call out is that the way the chapter is organized, it has a section that calls out allowed uses, section that calls out conditionally permitted uses, one that calls out prohibited uses, and then it goes and does something that no other zone district does. It provides a list of uses allowed based on ground floor area. And so that gets kind of conflicting, convoluted, and I'm not sure. I guess my question to Planning Commission is that our intent to move forward to be that restrictive on what uses are allowed in?
Like educational service, that could be any number of things. And
Yes.
why would you want to prohibit it? I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. It's certainly, I mean, let's say somebody wants to have an officer where they do scuba diving training or something. I mean, you know, it doesn't, to me, I recognize we're not going to put it doesn't make any sense. We're not going to put a 500 student school down there, but I mean, there are other things that might be educational services that would be great to have.
Let's say a class wants to go through the museum.
Yeah, I mean, or that there even is at the museum, they hold a class. I mean, that, to me, that just doesn't make any sense. And I don't know why they put it there. I mean, unless they were just trying to eliminate, you know, somebody putting in another grammar school there or something. That, so I guess I just think that doesn't need to be there.
And it also seems to kind of, the usage of those spaces kind of conflicts a little with the design objectives overall, if that makes sense. You know, none of these design objectives here say we want to see X type of commercial or, you know, building usage. It's,
Yeah, I understand. Those are all good and helpful comments. So then I think we'll look at the next one, and let's talk about this more like holistically at the end, but keep giving me your comments. The other one they called out was discouragement of access onto, let me make sure I got that one, access onto Front Street and North Bayshore Drive for uses served by the streets Alder, Birch, Cedar, Date, and Fir. So all of those interconnecting local streets, they are discouraging access directly onto Front or Bayshore. And in the code, it's not mandatory. It doesn't say thou shalt not have access. It just says we discourage it. And so the question is, and I guess I should preface, in that that is a good thing when you're trying to limit safety concerns along a heavier traveled road. You want less access points, less chances of conflict with a vehicle to vehicle or pedestrian to vehicle. So it's not a bad thing to do. It's also, on the other side, Front Street is a local street, and the whole point of a local street is to provide access. So I guess from Planning Commission's perspective, is it something that we want to make absolutely mandatory that you don't access when you're in these blocks? And I don't know if you can see it, in these blocks here, you have to take your access off of these smaller side streets? Or do we want to leave it as, well, we just want to discourage it? And in that respect, maybe it's better to just kind of clarify the code to say these are desired outcomes versus mandatory.
Well, help me understand now, okay, so we have the thing here, we have these streets that come into it. So the point is, are they saying they don't want to be able to turn off of Bayshore into that, only at either end? Is that really the idea? And so you wouldn't turn off of Bayshore on Park and turn in there, or on Birch and turn in there to get to this area. You'd either enter it from one end or the other.
It's just the opposite.
Not quite. What they're saying is they don't want any traffic from Bayshore or Front Street to come into the properties from that street. They would rather them first make the turn onto Date and then access the property, or make the turn onto Cedar and then access the property.
Oh, okay.
They don't want any more
That makes-
driveways off
that makes
off
more
of Front
sense.
Street or off North
Off
Bayshore.
front, into Front Street.
That
Yeah.
makes sense.
So you want, okay, so you want to use the side streets to get into the.
Right.
Yeah,
places.
yeah.
But Front Street itself doesn't have the cross traffic, and I guess I get that.
Yeah, that makes more
Not-
sense.
It's not a
I think it's-
thoroughfare.
I
Yeah,
think it's
like it is
more
now.
any new curb cuts across the sidewalk.
Yeah.
They don't want that pedestrian vehicle conflict there,
Yeah.
is the way I read it.
Yes.
So what would happen if it was limited just to people that work or own properties there and delivery trucks, and otherwise it's all bicycle or pedestrian?
You'd have to have a place.
You'd
to
still
park.
have to have that access curb cut driveway, and so you'd still have the potential.
I think where it makes sense would be, if you have one of the exterior side lots, okay, if you already have a curb cut, I don't think anyone's talking about taking that away on Front Street or North Bayshore, but maybe just no new ones.
Yeah.
But if you have an interior lot and that's your only access, then that's your only access. I don't think we can hardly
No, you couldn't take
take
it
that
away.
away.
Yeah.
So I could see something like that, maybe limiting any new for those exterior lots that do have side access available to them off of one of those
Well,
cross streets
If
there.
we're just saying discouraging, that we really
Yeah.
can
no,
take up in the future any special cases.
Yeah.
Well, but
Yeah.
I think, are we wanting to define that a little bit more so than just saying discourage? Or,
And that's my question to Planning Commission. Is it okay as is to just say we want to discourage it, but that leaves it flexible to allow somebody to use it? Or on the opposite spectrum, is it not restrictive enough because anybody could come in and just put
Well,
driveways?
they'd have to be approved. If we were gonna discourage it, we'd have to approve it,
Yeah.
make a special case for it. And then they would have to give us a good reason to make an exception.
Well, none of these, unless it's a bigger development, it wouldn't come to Planning Commission, and it's not a mandatory criteria, so we couldn't say no unless it says no.
I personally think that you should probably, if you're gonna make new curb cuts, the impact on the parking down there would be the consideration.
On-street parking?
Correct, because I mean, I think that's been the issue that people have been looking at, and there's various plans, this many parking spaces.
Yes.
And if you're parking along the street, you're putting a curb, that, you know, you get the idea.
You're removing an on-street parking space.
And I mean, I would, my own personal opinion is leave it up to the discretion of whoever's working in your department, with the idea being the parking is the main issue. Because, I mean, I don't see, I mean, the idea is to less traffic with, going fast, number one, less traffic, interacting with human beings on the whatever. But, I mean, you drive down that road right now, and you can't go that fast. Or if you do, and if don't have wide tires and you get into the railroad tracks, then I guess you can go fast there, but you're only going one direction. And, I mean, especially if there's more people. I mean, I'm just trying to, I'm thinking of this along the Newport waterfront type of an idea. I mean, you can't, well, I guess you could go fast, but you'd be in jail. So, I don't think that the curb cuts is gonna make the determining factor. I think parking should be the most prominent consideration.
Yes, good point.
Well, I think if we live it discouraging it, that's, should kind of cover the idea, you know? I always hate it when you have something that's so rock solid that even though there might be a terrific reason to do it, then you have to, you know, turn the world upside down to get it done. And I don't think we can foresee everything enough to do that,
Right.
if that makes sense.
Well, I think there's a problem too that we can't really get away from. My biggest fear would be a street full of pedestrians and people having a good time, and here comes a big motorhome right down through the middle of it. But you've got the dump station there, so they've got to, and once they get into that, they've got to get out.
But it's not a steady traffic. I mean, you know, I think that the main thing, I think, is to be able to create something where people will be down there trying to have fun, whether they have to dodge the odd motorhome or not, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think I hear you, and sounds like as is, leaving some flexibility is good. I also talked about the current provisions for off-street parking location and the screening requirements. Right now, we have a requirement, I brought up the yards, provision for yards that says a building on Front Street cannot be more than 2 feet from the property, the street front property side. And also that parking, while it's not required really, except for tourist habitation uses, if it's provided, it needs to be on the interior of a lot or behind a building, and it needs to be screened to the extent possible. And so, question is, because the city in this plan includes provision for a parking lot, and because it is difficult to both orient your building to the water when you're on the waterfront, that's your property frontage, and also then be required to put parking between the water and your building. How important is this to Planning Commission? Is it more important to have parking behind a building, or more just generally important that it's screened? Could you give some flexibility as to where a parking lot is located if it was effectively screened? Or do we like it how it is? We want people to build buildings up front on the street and put their parking behind, even when they might be on the waterfront.
There's not gonna have much room back there, for one thing.
Right.
There's not gonna be big parking lots going in back there. But can I jump back on one thing on this prohibition of transportation? Except rail and marine, well, technically that would mean taxi cabs and our little goofy bus thing. And so why wouldn't you want those to be able to access the place?
What? I think they can't have like their taxi headquarters there.
Well, is that, or they, I mean, could they have a taxi stand? And they have a bus stop?
Bus stop, yeah.
I mean, those things to me, you know, I mean, I don't think it'd be likely that they'd want to be the corporate center for yellow cab going in there. But, well, maybe for the view, but, you know, I guess I'm just saying, I mean, that,
They could do that.
to me, I think that needs to be at least understood, that we still need to be able to use, I mean, otherwise, how are these poor people gonna get down there if they can't take that bus
That's right.
to have fun? And cabs and, you know, limousine service to the Banadoons and anything else, those are all transportation services.
Right.
And I can't think of anything else, because, you know, rail and marine, the marine transportation is gonna be, I don't even know what that would be, you know, unless we're gonna have a ferry that's gonna come along and be there, that, you know, that.
Yeah, your Rex getting excited.
Yeah, that's, you know, I'm just not gonna get onto that point, but I said from the very beginning, we talk about waterfront, and there's
Yep.
no place down there. There's no place in all three of these that you
That's
can
right.
actually physically go down and touch the
That's right.
water.
I
And I
agree.
think that is a huge shame.
No, that-
If,
Yeah.
if you ever did something on the water where people could actually see the waterfront from the water,
Yeah.
it changes the whole perspective.
You could have
Well, then why are we
a
allowing-
barge, a party barge or something
Well, why
out
don't we
there.
fix that?
Let's bring the old
Well,
piece.
I tried to, and it got nowhere.
Well, then we didn't try hard enough.
Well, I guess, I mean, that,
Well, I think we should have a comment that we think that there needs to be access to the water
Absolutely.
through this project, and I think Rick's absolutely right.
Yeah.
If somebody wants, if you talk about having kayaks and stuff, well, then,
More, we need more than kayaks, though.
Yeah.
Wasn't there a kayak launch
Well, there-
proposed in here somewhere?
Never happened at the museum.
Close
It's
to
never
the
happened.
museum.
I thought that was in the,
well, it was in there, is it gone now?
it's just
I
never
haven't seen it
happened.
yet.
Well, but I mean, this is what's gonna happen, and so, I mean, it would be part of the future, not
Yeah,
something that's already there.
well, there's huge, I've noticed today, they're tearing out all the docks down there, and they're taking the pilings with them. Once the piling's gone, you will never get one back in. It is a crime not to use that waterfront. Waterfront taxi going from North Bend Boardwalk all the way to, and turn around, where the ships do there at the Edgewater,
That's right.
would be
Yeah.
huge. It would be our own skunk train.
Well, we certainly shouldn't make it so that it can't happen. You know,
Yeah.
we should create some kind of access there so that it could. I mean, if somebody wants to provide that, and they're in the past have had
Yeah.
services like that didn't do great, but you never know in the future what they
Well,
might do.
the
Well, the guy with the plane.
I thought
Yeah.
the Mill Casino should have a little party boat or something, go up and down and drop people off and pick people up.
Yeah, it would be,
The whole area.
one of the, if you want people to stop and do something fun,
Yeah.
that would be,
Well, can we put a comment in that we would like to see access to the water in spite of all the times we've been told no in the
Some
past?
kind of a port or something.
yeah.
Yes, and so I think that's in that plan, is saying, yes, we want to
Okay.
see access to the waterfront, and I think we all agree that marine type transportation and the rail, they say that's allowed down there. And we would like to see things like the ability for taxis and limousines and buses to come through and pick people up, drop them off, but we don't necessarily want to see their headquarter operations.
Which I think would be unlikely, I mean, you know.
Right.
And but I mean, prohibition of it just sounds, I don't even know where they came up with that. But anyway, I think that clearly people need to be able to get there and get away from there.
Yes.
And, well, anyway, I'll shut up.
does, jumping back to number 6 there, the yards, does that mean that they have to be within 2 feet of a?
Yes.
Am I reading that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And so I think the goal is to get the buildings on Front Street up along the sidewalks.
See, there, it refers to the bus shelter there,
Mm-hmm.
and says here that, anyway.
And
Well, and I guess my question is, are there conflicts when they talk about orienting a building to the waterfront? Like, what does that mean, right? We kind of need to talk that out. But then also pull the building up to the street, and if you're gonna put parking in there, put your parking behind your building. Are those things conflicting with that wanting to get to the waterfront? So, let's talk some more about the water-oriented. So there's a provision that non-water dependent related primary ground level uses, this is only ground level uses in a building, on property adjacent the waterfront, so those lots east of Front Street, must be water oriented and provide goods and services to the general public.
What do they mean by water oriented?
That is a good question.
Seafood restaurant?
It doesn't mean
Well,
facing the
Well, yeah,
water?
but let me tell you why I question this.
Okay.
Because we have this marine, water-dependent, water-related zoning on the bay. And it's been nothing but a pain in the ass for anybody trying to do anything there. Because when it was done, with the wisdom of some people 40 years ago, they wanted these areas to be kept for like mills that were gonna be loading lumber, and, you know. Well, it turns out that's just not where things are going. And so, when somebody wanted to put something in like this, like the
Coos Bay Village?
Coos Bay Village, it was a big deal. Well, I don't know if it was for that one, but I mean, in the past, it always has been. For anything somebody wanted to do down there that didn't have a dock and a giant steamship in front of it, which didn't exist. So that's why when we say water-oriented, or do we mean that you're gonna have to provide seafood? Does it mean you're gonna have pictures of boats inside, or you're gonna, I mean, because that's what, that needs to be defined. I don't know what they mean by water-oriented.
I agree, because when I'm looking at it myself, I'm going, do you want the building to just, in the frontage, orient to the water? Or does the use in that building need to relate to water?
And that's crazy, because you may have something totally different there that's very attractive and appealing, people wanna go see, but it doesn't have anything to do with the water, it's to do with a commercial area that's.
Right, like a
that's kinda
museum
zoned.
or,
Yeah, well, I mean, so what it does is forces people to go through kind of hoops that they shouldn't have to.
Yeah.
If, to try to meet these standards that.
Right.
I agree.
Really don't make any sense, so I guess I just want us to be, I mean, the point is, you wouldn't go down there and put your business there, and with all the, all the kind of conflict, difficulty with parking, all the other things you're gonna have, if you didn't have some business that was gonna benefit from that location.
yes,
Right.
yeah, that makes
A
sense.
touristry type business rather than a automobile repair place or something.
Well, yeah, I mean, but nobody, see, that would be nuts for somebody to put, automobile repair place, or,
Right.
or, some other stuff that would have no business being there.
Right.
It's the view.
Yeah, it's
View of the water.
because and it's the aesthetics around it.
Yeah, but if you wanted a candy store there, why not?
Well, sure, and you wouldn't have to do saltwater tapping just because it was,
Well, they always will have that right at the door.
Commissioner
That's
Stevens,
great, Jim.
you look like you want to say something.
Well, even through context, it's really hard, I was kind of looking through here again, but I remember kind of looking through this, trying to suss out what exactly they were trying to really get at, water oriented. I can't tell if it's like you're saying, is it directionally? Is it like Jim's talking about, where we want lumber loaded onto ships, or saltwater taffy, or, yeah, it's
For the
tough
water
to,
board.
it's tough to really
Yeah, right.
figure out what the intent behind that
Come right
was,
in, call it the water.
Right, and so going beyond trying to figure out the intent, like moving forward, does it do the city good to be that restrictive? To say, we're gonna look at your use down to the whether or not it's water oriented to determine whether or not we'll let you be there. If it's a commercial or industrial allowed use, should that not just be sufficient?
Yeah.
I think it should be, that should be sufficient.
I think
Yeah.
that we wear ourselves out sometimes trying to channel what should be, I mean,
Yeah.
I've watched
Yeah.
Coos Bay the last 30 years, struggling with the fact that we don't have enough cute shops downtown. Well, they go in and they go out of business a few months, they've gotta be able to operate a business there that can survive and not just please somebody's notion of what sounds cute,
Yeah,
And like Jim said, if it doesn't work, it'll go out of business, and then there'll be a space open for somebody else.
Right,
Is-
okay.
Well, nobody should go into business there without knowing they have a good chance of surviving either, that,
That
you know.
doesn't stop people.
Yeah, right, but you'd hope that they would have a good chance.
Yeah, well, I mean,
And, yeah,
the neighborhood and the reason, the whole idea is that to be in this place, to have a business there, is that you would want a business that benefited from people coming, getting out of the car, wandering around. You know,
Yeah.
you wouldn't want
Yeah,
to have
right.
your tractor repair
yeah,
place there,
Right.
because that, it would,
yeah,
you would not benefit from the location.
no. A
already
pedestrian
own it.
intensive area type of business, you know.
How, um, I, jumping back to this setback
Yes,
requirement there, I'm worried, I see that they can go up to 3 stories or 35 feet in height, whichever is lower there. I'm worried if someday someone either consolidated some lots or just over time, if we had a row of 3-story buildings there set back 2 feet only, that would be a dark little tunnel through there 90% of the time. That seems like we really, it's already a very narrow right-of-way through there. And if we had rows of buildings right up within 2 feet of that setback line there, and a rail car going through, and vehicles lined up and down one side of the street, forget about curb cuts, there'd be nowhere to walk anyways.
Well, you go behind them, so you're just getting your feet wet, because they're built at the edge of the bay, you know, I mean, I haven't gone back and wandered around, but I can't believe there's much room back there.
But
Yeah.
it's both sides of the street though,
Yeah.
yeah? I mean, so even the side that's not, you know, you got the one side, Knutson's and all that row is already right up against the sidewalk there,
Yep.
basically. And then if the other side eventually followed suit and new buildings came up that met that, I mean, it would be,
yeah, and the difference in this setback requirement is it's not a minimum, it's a maximum, right? So it's requiring it be no less than 2 feet from the street. And so you would, with new development, have buildings just lining those streets. And they may be 1 story, but you're right, they might be
right.
more.
So I mean, I think that would be something that I think we should consider is looking at requiring it to be within 2 feet of the,
Mm-hmm.
I think I would rather we have I would rather have people shift back and have that more of an open headway feel than having those buildings right up to the line, because I mean, then it is just gonna feel like,
Yeah, you would walk in the street.
yeah, it would feel like it.
And I would add, I guess, too, that it's kind of along the lines of, is it better to let the market decide where that building on the site would best be sited when you're trying to encourage people to come and build new, or, you know, is requiring that it be at this certain spot on the property gonna make it more difficult to develop the lot?
That's a good point.
So do any other commissioners have a thought about whether or not it's beneficial to require a building be up against the street, or is it beneficial to be a little more flexible?
What would be the purpose of making them all straight 2 feet long?
Yeah.
What's the purpose of that?
I think to create kind of a pedestrian-friendly walkway. In theory, the building is up on the sidewalk that, you know, people can see in the windows if they're shopping or whatever. It's not separated from the people walking on the street by a parking lot. That's kind of the theory there, but I don't know that, you know, it necessarily is implemented that way.
I would think different businesses have different requirements for parking and for people walking and that type of thing, so.
Are there width
For the road?
In between the buildings? Can they do zero setback there? against
Every
each
other
other?
side is no setback. Yeah,
Oh, so you can have two together and not. So that kind of creates sort of that, some open spaces between them, I guess. And what happens to those open spaces?
Dark little alleyways.
Are they big
That's where
people to go, or are
That's
they?
where Batman's parents meet their fate, Jim.
Yeah,
The alleyway.
yeah, kind of creating a box canyon there.
Yeah, yeah, you might create a wind tunnel or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
And, you know, each building has to have a little bit of personality to it. You
Yeah,
don't want them all looking
right.
the same, and if they're all just straight on the front,
Right.
then you're very limited in what you can do.
The village is a good example, though. They're similar, but
Yeah.
they're in different areas, different sizes and shapes
Yeah.
and different angles.
Well, and that's another thing too, the waterfront district has some, you know, some regulations on colors and materials.
Yeah.
However, they've eased that a lot. In the beginning, it was a much more restricted. If you didn't have, you know, 1920s tin on your building, it wasn't gonna fly.
Yeah.
No, we've worked so that with that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The other, I mean, I just noticed another thing there, they're worried about, these signs people set on the sidewalk, you know.
yes, standard signs.
And, I mean, sometimes some of these things, to have kind of a vibrant market community,
Yeah,
you want people to be able to kind
Yeah.
of pitch their stuff.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
And I know
Right.
that in our building, we had to go through some goofy stuff because the quilt store, somebody wanted to have one of these little tent signs there. We had to demonstrate to a state attorney that came down that they could indeed go through their building, their store, and through our office and get to 101, and therefore they were officially a 101 business. I mean, it just seemed like, you know, there was plenty of sidewalk there, nobody was falling over it or anything, but
Yeah.
it's just that we come up with this stuff that's so hard and fast, and then I think we regret it later because, but we think, well, God, somebody must have thought it was a wonderful idea to start with. Anyway, I'm kind of awareness now with that, but those are little things I think we can ease up on a little bit rather than have just, I mean, if I were going down there to start a business and they were just got a whole page of rules,
Right,
because I hate rules.
right,
Yeah.
right. Well, yeah, they need to be individual businesses.
yeah.
okay. And so I guess you mentioned architectural design standards. Do we feel at this point in time that those are still, as they are today, still working for us? I see a lot of shoulds in there.
What
There's a
page are we on now?
few mandatory like requirements, but anytime you're doing work on new development in that area, it does require the design assistance team to review it. So that is not a big hurdle, but it takes extra application, a little more time, and all for something that is really only being encouraged for the most part, not, you know, mandatory.
Well, seems I have to have something to say about everything here tonight, but
That's what I like, Jim.
Good, Jim.
one of the things that I've found, and I was on the design review committee for a while, and was the fact that somebody comes in and starts their little business, well, they need a sign yesterday. They don't need a sign 60 days from now that's, we've all pontificated about, and, you know, and so, to me, if we, I mean, I understand why we want to have, we don't want a lot of goofy colors and wacky signs,
Yeah.
but I think we need to shorten the time frame that it takes to do it. You know, and I think that, you know, it's so easy to say, wow, well, it takes a month for this, then we go to there's gotta be a meeting next week, and then next month, and so they need that right away.
Didn't that get changed a couple of years ago where we moved those as long as wasn't the staff able to make that determination now as long as they were in compliance with the
not the way the code reads. The code says that the design assistance team will review signs, and then it has, some specific signs that are allowed, some that are prohibited, like sandwich boards are prohibited in that area. And then the review criteria is pretty much that the sign should kind of emulate the historic time and the building. So I would argue that maybe an architectural design review is not necessary for a sign itself. For the building it's gonna go on, that seems reasonable. For the sign, I don't know.
And, you know, maybe we just did that for the, development down there. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. But I
Coos
thought-
Bay
Yeah.
Village,
Yeah, the Coos Bay Village. I think maybe.
Yeah.
that is what you
That
did,
was part of it,
Okay.
yeah.
yeah.
So
And,
maybe just-
and
maybe it was
whether
just-
it was facing Broadway or not, and whether it had lights in the middle of it or not.
Yeah, I was misremembering.
Well, they said, you know, we don't want flashy neon and all that
Right.
kind of stuff, but I think that signage is sort of an art in itself.
It is.
And,
Right.
you know, you want, and then I think the thing is, sometimes we talk about this evocative period that we're trying to emulate, you know, and I don't think sometimes people have any idea what they're talking about when they're talking about that, or what they really imagine, you know.
Well, they're talking about the 1920s to 1940s, and I've almost thought that, that they're going about that backwards. Instead of saying, you know, you've got to use tin siding or whatever, why not say, these are the things you can't use? You know, you can't, for the architectural stuff, you can't use T111, you can't use
Yeah.
vinyl siding, you can't do CMU. If you do, you need to dress up that concrete block with something nicer.
Yeah.
I think we could, if you said, this is what you can't do, I mean, if somebody wanted to put a brick building up there, why not? They
Yeah.
built lots of brick buildings in the 20s.
Sure they did.
So, I think that's really too restrictive. At the time, everybody wanted to make it look like Florence, or wanted to make it look like Bandon, and that's just never happened.
Well, or in Leavenworth, Washington, if you've ever been there.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
I mean, that's sort of the
Yeah,
poster boy
yep.
for community.
Okay,
cohesiveness.
can I ask, is it important to regulate uses based on ground, where they can be in the floor of a building? Do we want to say that one use can go in the ground floor, but another can't? It has to be upstairs? Or is it okay to just say these are the uses allowed and let the business decide where is best for them?
Well,
Well, certainly with residential, it's got to be upstairs. You don't
Okay.
want that on the ground floor. But otherwise,
I would think that's gonna be an issue that would kind of solve itself if we let it. I mean, maybe there could be a cool little residential, or, I don't know. I mean, a walk-up would be cool, but, I don't know.
Well, if you had a little hotel there, for example, could they have a room on the ground floor? Would that be a residential use, or would that be a commercial use, I suppose, because I guess.
That's where the manager says.
well, good examples like Bandon Dunes, I think they've got their, you know, where you make appointments and whatever downstairs, and they've got the administration
Yeah.
upstairs. That makes sense.
Sure. But anyway, well, I guess that what are we talking about for the permitted uses? Or the forbidden uses would be like residential. Is there anything other than that?
So an administrative civic use is not allowed in a ground level in the core area 1. And civic assemblies, clubs, those are not allowed in ground level of a building. Business support centers are not allowed in ground level in core area 1. Child care facility and a medical clinic are both specifically called out as not allowed in ground floor levels. Those are, oh, and, well, and then a postal service has to be on the ground level, it can't be on an upper floor. Watercraft sales and rentals cannot be in an upper level floor.
So if someone had a two-story, like,
North Bend Power Sports,
yeah,
that wouldn't be okay upstairs. If a business could come up with a creative way to make that work, and it works for their operations, and it's enhancing the area, do we care whether or not they're upstairs, or they're here, albeit the residential? You want to see that upstairs?
It's just a residential. I don't, if they, if they rent the building or lease the building, they can do whatever they want, I would think.
But see, that's not what we're trying to, that's not the message here that we're trying to, I guess, we're giving. Because we don't care what, we're saying what we want.
right.
We're not saying that you could rent the building and do whatever you want with it. We're saying we want you to rent the building and do a business that we like.
No, see, that's not gonna fly.
And one that we think is attractive for the area, because that's why we're doing the effort of building this cute street.
Yeah.
But and mostly people wouldn't rent the building. I'd like to hope the market would take care of itself, but I guess we don't want to trust that, so.
Well, I mean, I think that's what
Why we're here.
that could be, yeah, I mean, maybe we look at loosening up these restrictions that are placed in this district and kind of, I see the merit of something like residential on the, not being ground level. I get that, but other than that, if someone feels we need a 45th weed store in town, go ahead, try it. If someone thinks they can do a two-story kayak and surfboard, stand-up paddleboard store, more
Perhaps
power
they
to
would
them.
restricted to using water pipes.
Yeah, water-oriented, bubblers only. I think, yeah.
This is kind of foolish, but on prohibited uses, uses expressly prohibited, over here you've got fuel sales other than marine. What do you do about charging stations? Those are fuel.
Ah, right. Or what our gas stations fall under are service stations, and those are not allowed in the Waterfront Heritage District. So any new service station technically would not fall under it. And so you're right, if we, if a gas station is similar to an EV charging station, then they're not allowed. So we maybe consider,
Well, we've already got charging stations there,
yeah,
so.
and I don't know how they made that accommodation.
Well, I think if you just simply said fuel sales, with the exception of electric vehicles or charging stations, worded somehow.
Okay, so make sure that we're accounting for the allowance for EV charging stations, and still okay to prohibit gas stations,
Yes,
others,
yes.
okay.
Gas and diesel, you bet.
What if, maybe someone comes in and has a great gas station idea. I mean, really, truly, I don't think anyone's going to. That's not prime. But
Pretty expensive real estate for a gas.
that's what I'm saying. I don't
Taking
know
up
why
a lot of space for-
we could go, we could spend
There's a lot of
months
gas stations in the
trying to
area.
come up with different businesses we could exclude or include in this
Yeah.
district, when the reality is, people aren't gonna build a gas station right there, and if they do, it's probably gonna be the most amazing gas station we've ever seen, and it'd be a,
And we know what one of the historic uses of the buildings down there was. Probably we can't get into that, but
start, got a new business idea there.
Yeah, if you really want to go back to the old times.
Yeah,
I think it's called the Cozy Rooms, if I'm not mistaken. Only heard stories about it, of course, but
30 minutes at a time.
not to be confused with a charging station.
Well, there's such a huge difference between number 3, 1, 2, and 3. Number 3 is, I have a difficulty trying to make those mesh because 3 is so contemporary, and 1 and 2 are, some of them been there since the 20s.
Yeah.
So it's really tough. However, I think it's a wonderful idea to get people down there and use those areas, and they bring their money with them.
Yes, so I think I'm hearing Planning Commission is comfortable with trying to make the zoning standards in the Waterfront Heritage District in the Front Street area more flexible, more open to allow development as opposed to restrictive. And so, well, tonight I don't have any examples of what I would do. I would want to take that in what we've talked about and work on drafting an update and then bring that back to you and say, is this what you're thinking?
Okay.
I'm just noticing on this chart, I mean, you have, the vast majority of these boxes have a P in them. So, I mean, you're not looking at a lot of variation, I guess.
Right.
So I don't know how much time it's worth talking about.
Or could that table go away and we just generalize what are allowed uses, commercial, industrial?
Right, that's a
Except
good
for-
idea.
Yeah.
I think for a long
Yeah.
time, we've tried to force businesses to share and buy into this vision and this vision alone. And maybe we just take our hand off the wheel a little bit and let it kind of evolve into what it's going to be. And
Well, the vision's changed too over the years, so.
right, and someone's got an idea that none of us are even thinking about at this point, and, you
It
know.
cuts both ways, though. And what if it's gonna be a big room full of a bunch of kids watching YouTube videos? Which is
Then-
something they do. It's
then-
horrible.
Well, if that's what they're gonna do, they might as well do it in the city of Coos Bay and not the city of North Bend.
If they're gonna make money doing it.
It's a social opportunity for those
Yeah.
kids to get out in person and watch YouTube together.
So I did find a couple X's. Here, Josh, this is one for you. I figured what you're gonna do with this. Drive-throughs, there's no drive-throughs allowed on the upper level.
You mean you can't kinda
What
get
about,
to the?
now, when we've all got our
We're not.
private personal drones that we sit in,
Yeah.
and you gotta
Well,
be thinking 3D here, Rex.
Jetsons?
Get off the
Yes.
terra firm there.
You just go up and get your burger and come back down.
Exactly.
You'd have to apply for conditional
You know,
use.
but this,
Yeah.
that does show the wisdom that they chose not to allow those in the second.
That's what they've been shooting down though recently, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
You gotta be careful how high you go.
Don't get up in the traffic
Although you
patterns.
could have a fish market on the second floor, which,
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
that
They
was,
can throw fish out the window to you, like
Yeah.
become the next Seattle.
Yeah.
I could have a slide.
Yeah. Okay, does anybody have any other kind of specific things they want to talk about? I think at this point, it'll just be those next steps, taking what we've discussed and turning it into something for you to review.
yeah, loosen it up a little bit,
Okay.
yeah.
I think, you kind of get the idea that we just sort of see it as a more dynamic process and not sort of as quite so rigid
Yes.
and at least my experience with rigidity in these things has been sort of
Yeah.
Too much.
arguing about stuff that we shouldn't have to, I mean.
Right.
I agree.
Well, okay.
Okay.
I need to ask if there's any citizen input or public comment.
I don't think.
I don't believe so, not that
Okay.
I'm aware
Should we
of.
go out in the street and see if we can find it?
You can be a citizen too, though. Citizen hat.
You can hit your gavel.
Well, no, we gotta have planning commission comments. Anybody?
I think we've commented.
Okay?
I
Staff?
just, why no neon signs?
Some people don't like neon signs, just like, I guess because, well, you want to,
When did
Well,
neon
well,
come in?
I had two questions with that. I don't know when neon signs come about, but I think they were around back then.
historically.
And then the other thing is, what can you do with the neon that you can't do with LEDs nowadays? So they don't stop LEDs.
Yeah, lighting.
So,
You think it's kind of a throwback, I mean, I remember talking about this neon sign stuff, and
oh, yeah.
I think the whole idea is that they have imagined sort of Las Vegas looks that we don't want, but some little sign that you might have in your window that says open and it's neon, or even some other, they can be very cool, I mean, you can have.
Most of
Coors
them do
do
that. Most of them are that.
Yeah, and, you know, the other thing is that, or one of the other things is that they, you know, they don't want reader boards, and that all started with Chevron down there, because it was gonna be in this whole thing, and then that's why we changed that, so on the west side of 101, that's a different ballgame there, but then, you know, here's a museum putting in a big reader board,
No,
so.
the city has them too, which is
Yeah,
beyond me.
well, but that's not in the historic district, but
No.
this is in the historic district, so I don't know, I don't know that you can just tell people no on everything. I'm not crazy about great big, the Ingalls sign kind of bothers me, that's a bit much, and I don't think we need that down there, but if somebody had a nice neon sign, I don't know that I'd object to that, if it was, you know, Seven Devils and neon, we're open, or something like that. I don't know that you really can say, oh, no.
And look at how beautiful the Tioga is with that.
Yeah.
Lit back up, you
Yeah.
know, I mean, when it's done right
That
and
was-
maintained, it's
Definitely,
forever.
that was
It's not gaudy.
definitely the
Yeah,
20s
yeah.
when it was
Yeah.
built.
Right.
You know, it was built, it started in the 20s and then stopped. It wasn't finished till after the Second World War,
Yeah,
so it stood vacant for 25 years or something like that.
so you good with that, Patrick?
Yeah,
Okay,
no, I guess that was my answer. I'm a big proponent of neon signs. My address in my house is a neon sign. My wife hates it. I love it. And,
Nice.
So, yeah.
Okay,
staff comments.
nothing much. I guess I'll remind commissioners that the work on the Coos Bay Estuary Management Plan update, which doesn't talk about uses and activities, just cleaning up the plan, that is still scheduled to come before Planning Commission probably April at this point. Also, the city is working on obtaining shared tablets for commission board use, to where you would check out a tablet at the meeting time and you could from there review your agenda and all of that. And so it's going towards trying to limit resources on paper and mailing, and also make sure that you have access to it at the meeting. And it will also provide another avenue by which commissioners could log into a certain kind of platform and review the agenda and make notes for themselves, and then they would have those in front of them while you're reviewing. So just a heads up, I think
Okay.
they're looking at having that start in March or April.
So we're gonna just give us each a tablet at one time.
I know, like a personal one, yeah.
Yeah.
And they're not doing that, they're just doing a set for the groups, different groups to share. Also, this new system that Tyler is here for, it's going to be beneficial in that it will kind of create a record, the minutes of a meeting, and so Planning Commission will no longer need to have written meetings prepared. We'd have our agenda side by side, the video recording, and that would be the minutes legally for the meeting, and so you wouldn't need to be reviewing and approving those. So that change will soon be coming down the pipes too. So just a heads up.
Good.
Can we still get paper copies if we?
If you want paper copies, you just let me know and we'll make sure you get one, yeah.
Should be able to print it. Is that home?
And the estuary plan is up at SWAT tomorrow from
Yeah.
4 to 7.
Yes,
Oh,
thank
no.
you. So the Partnership for Coastal Watersheds is presenting the plan map updates at SWAC tomorrow, 4 to 7. So the community, anybody in the community is interested in seeing those maps, you can stop by and give your comments. And I think that's all for now. I'm sure there's much, much more, but that's all I've got for right now. So everybody have a happy Valentine's, and thank you for coming out tonight.
Thank you. We're adjourned.
But I like it showing up in the mailbox too.
Yeah, I agree.
sent through mail.
Pinned here,
But I
and then
mean,
I got a
we're talking.
bend and graham.
I-